So, would you guys like to say a few words to start? Anyone jump in?
That's very generous of you to appoint me as the first speaker.
You know, there's this Paul Simon album that came out in like 1971, and someone in the audience yells out, "Say a few words." And Paul says, "Let's all hope that we continue to live," and stops right there.
All right.
So-
Actually, you said you weren't going to ask for remarks, and I don't have any.
Okay.
So I will use this for something that I wanted to read that I was really worried that I wouldn't get a chance to read. But since you're giving us, but I will say this, that it's quite extraordinary. We're gathering here tonight, and there was a front page article in the New York Times, as you know, about Obama's reading. All of this because we elected a president who reads books. This actually is something to think about in terms of where our culture is, that this is something that's a subject for a discussion, that we've elected a president who reads books. Now, part of this, of course, is because it came after George Bush. But certainly we have had presidents who read books before, actually quite a few of them. And it was not considered worthy of comment. It was assumed, whether rightly or wrongly. But we have had a lot of presidents who, for their time, were well read. So I think it does show where our standards are, that this is regarded as a subject worthy of dissection and comment. And that's all I'm going to say. The other thing I'm going to use for my remarks is one of the books on Obama's list was the collected poetry of Langston Hughes. And, you know, we're talking about a time, most of the things on this list are not things he's read in the last 5 years. God knows how he had any time to read anything in the last 5 years, but things he read when he was young that he said that influenced him. And one of them was the collected poetry of Langston Hughes. And I don't know whether he read this poem, but I don't know how he could not have. I think if he started reading the collected poetry of Langston Hughes, he probably read it all. And this is, I think it has a relevance. I'm not saying he read it, but I'll bet he did. And I think it has a lot of relevance to our time today. And please excuse me for not being a good reader for poetry. A lot of you may have read this, but a lot of you may not have. It was written in 1949 by Langston Hughes about his experience as one of the about 2 or 3 black students at Columbia in the 1920s. And it's called Theme for English B. The instructor said, "Go home and write a page tonight, and let that page come out of you. Then it will be true." I wonder if it's that simple. I am 22, colored, born in Winston-Salem. I went to school there, then Durham, then here, to this college on the hill above Harlem. I am the only colored student in my class. The steps from the hill lead down into Harlem, through a park, then I cross St. Nicholas, 8th Avenue, 7th, and I come to the Y, the Harlem Branch Y, where I take the elevator up to my room, sit down and write this page. It's not easy to know what is true for you or me at 22, my age. But I guess I'm what I feel and see and hear. Harlem, I hear you, hear me, we too. You, me, talk on this page. I hear New York too. Me, who? Well, I like to eat, sleep, drink, and be in love. I like to work, read, learn, and understand life. I like a pipe for a Christmas present, or records, Bessie, Bop, or Bach. I guess being colored doesn't make me not like the same things other folks like who are other races. So will this page be colored that I write? Being me, it will not be white. But it will be a part of you, instructor. You're white, yet a part of me, as I am a part of you. That's American. Sometimes perhaps you don't want to be a part of me, nor do I often want to be a part of you. But we are, that's true. As I learn from you, I guess you learn from me, although you're older and white and somewhat more free. This is my page for English B.
I think it's not just a question that America has elected a president who reads, and we should celebrate this, but it's a question that the character of Barack Obama relied largely on self-invention, and that people who have had to, for various reasons, invent themselves, their reading becomes vitally important in their lives. And I think, for example, gay people know this, and I think a lot of women know this, that in those years especially, and you can see it in Dreams from My Father, when he is alone in Chicago, and when the wind is blowing there, and when you feel that his evenings are often spent alone, he doesn't have much money. You feel that those years before he went to study law were terribly important for him in reforming himself, in inventing himself, in learning to rely on himself. And that therefore how he read, and one can imagine him reading intensely and almost finding a mirror in which he could see himself in books where there weren't many other places where he could look to see himself. And so that I think simply because of who he is and where he's from, reading has been vital for him, and I think that's immensely important.
I want to pick up on those remarks because I think that it's very easy to project onto Obama all these, thoughts that we have about, Afro-American literature, about what it is to be black, about the ennobling experience of reading books, And the truth is that Barack Obama is a person who insists on his own singularity. The material that he had to fashion a self from was very unique material. It appeared that way to him. He was very convinced that he was not like other people, and that the self that he assembled was something that he did, as an act of will. And it was an act of will that was in part, something that he exercised while being alone by himself in a room with books. And it's made him, I think, very, very hard to know. It makes him, as a character, someone who's very, very different from politicians as we're accustomed to seeing them in the Bill Clinton mode or in the George Bush mode. There's a line that I had in a piece that I wrote for the New Republic about Obama's book, Dreams from My Father, which is a very interesting book I want to talk a little more about. But he talks about this period of reading, this from when he was at Columbia, a prior sort of period of aloneness. He says, "None of this concerned me much, for I didn't get many visitors. I was impatient in those days, busy with work and unrealized plans, and prone to see other people as unnecessary distractions." And this theme sort of runs through his book. It's a very odd theme for a politician to strike. The fact that he didn't like other people, he didn't want to be around them, he wanted to be alone, he was isolated. Even at the end of the book, when he sort of managed to forge this workable self, a self that he creates in part by sort of rejecting the idea of his white family as his family and embracing this idea of himself as a black man, which is something that he really creates because in many ways, of course, his father is not American. His father's from Kenya. He meets his father once when he's 10. His father also, by all accounts and by Obama's own account and the account of his family, is something of a monster. And so he sort of has this terrible personal task of trying to, integrate this uncomfortable personal history into a usable identity in an Afro-American community when his own personal history doesn't have that much in common with the sort of majority narrative of that community.